let in right now. Awesome. Lindsay's helping behind the scenes to take care of everything. Today, we are talking with school board candidates in the Kyrene district. I just need to copy and paste one more thing. All right, let me get back to where I need to be. All right, so let me see. We have more people coming in. We've got 5 participants so far. I did cross post this on quite a few different places, so hopefully we get more people coming in because right now it's just all of us plus, oh wait, no, there's some more attendees. Okay, great. Slowly trickling in. Oh, there's Wanda, another school board member. That's fantastic. I'm not sure if the other people are school board members, but if you'd like to go ahead and throw something in the chat to identify yourself or say why you're here, by all means, feel free to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight for our 8th candidate forum in the 2022 election cycle. Secular AZ is a 501c3 organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state in Arizona for over a decade. I am excited to be hosting our 8th in a series of candidate forums for school board candidates in Arizona. You know, our school board candidates are at the very bottom of the ballot in November. And we decided to begin hosting this type of event because our members care about the growing threat of white Christian nationalism in our state and country. And unfortunately, we're seeing how this political ideology is threatening our local school boards. And our local school boards truly are the heart of our democracy. So for those candidates who don't ever get the same kind of sun shining on them as maybe our statewide candidates or our congressional and Senate candidates, we wanted to shine some light on you. So I know we might have some newcomers here, and if our mission is something that you care deeply about, we ask you to consider becoming a member of our organization, perhaps even becoming a monthly donor, volunteering for various events throughout the state on one of our committees. If you have time, talent, and treasure to help us out, if you're great at web design, or if you're an excellent writer, we would love to be able to publish your works on our website. And then of course, you know, we've got the request to speak program through the Arizona legislature that we can help you with, that will help you be able to set up an account and engage with your state legislators. So tonight we are going, and you can go to secularaz.org for all of that information. I apologize. There's actually a group of volunteers in my living room right now, and somebody just rang the bell. And so my dog Moxie is on guard. So I apologize for the dog noises. So excuse me. Tonight, we are going to be speaking with candidates for the Kyrene School District Governing Board. According to public records in Maricopa County, there are 3 candidates running for 2 seats in Kyrene School District. There are 2 4-year seats open, and I want to acknowledge the other candidate running in Kyrene School District. The other candidate, Christy Oman, is running, but we didn't receive any response from her. So tonight, we are just going to be joined by 2 candidates running for the 4-year seat. That means we're being joined by a friend of mine, Kevin Walsh. When I was on the Creighton School Board, we would cross paths every once in a while at an ASBA event. And Trina Nelson, who actually has one of my dog's puppies that was a surprise pregnancy back in 2020, and they're both running for those 4-year seats. So it's unfortunate that Ms. Oman couldn't be here. We would have loved to have talked to her, but I'm happy to see the both of you. We're going to allow candidates to introduce themselves with a 3-minute limit in alphabetical order. I'll do my best. I should get this right since there's only 2 candidates. And then we'll ask questions with the second person going first the next time, and so on. You get the idea. So I'm going to say probably actually around 6:45 or so, since we only have 2 candidates. So around 6:40, 6:45, we will open it up to audience questions, and then we'll ask for closing statements. I would say maybe around 7:15 or 7:30, depending on how all this goes. So if you do have questions, by all means, feel free to throw them in the chat. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this party started. So we are going to be starting with Trina Nelson first, and her name is spelled Trine, and it's pronounced Trina. So just want to make sure I get that right and that all the audience members know how to do it. Again, you can ask questions on Facebook. So take 3 minutes, Trina, and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Yes, it is Trina with an E. It's Norwegian. I have lived in the Kyrene community for over 10 years now. I have 2 kids, one who just finished his Kyrene experience, is matriculating to Tempe Union, and another who's in 4th grade. And I have spent probably the past 18 years of my professional life working in and around education, helping design curriculum at ASU, but also initially helping young people kind of see the link between education and career opportunities. That was probably one of the most impactful professional experiences that I had at the time, because the youth were transitioning out of juvenile justice and foster care. And so I really saw what really at a young age, what good scaffolding from a community, from an education system could do, and the difference it could make in the lives of children. I've been involved as a parent volunteer, a PTO board member. Most recently, I was the co-chair for the Keep Kyrene Strong M&O Override campaign, which was very successful. And over the years, I've really gotten to know this community. And what I value most about it is its diversity and its care for its children and its passion for education. And that's ultimately why I'm running to be on the Kyrene School Board, is to see that success continue over the years and to build on what has already come before me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Trina. Same to you, Kevin. Go ahead and introduce yourselves to the folks out there, or yourself to the folks out there. I got this.
Thanks, Jeannie. My name is Kevin Walsh. I'm currently on the Kyrene board right now. I'm actually in my 4th year of my 1st term. So I was elected 4 years ago. It's been the best and I think biggest honor of my life. Kyrene it's at the heart of our family. I've got 2 kiddos in Kyrene. We live in Tempe. I've got a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, and my wife is expecting, so soon we're going to have a 3rd Kyrene kid. So it's really core to us. We come from a family of educators. Their grandmother is entering her 24th year teaching in Kyrene. Their step-grandmother, who we affectionately call Scramma, taught for decades in the Casa Grande district before she retired. Their grandpa has taught in Tempe Union in special ed for over 20 years. So education is really at, I think, the heart of our family, and Kyrene is at the heart of that. One of the things that I've really focused on in my time here with Kyrene is really just trying to support our schools. I've served in a variety of capacities with Kyrene. I started off on volunteering in the classroom, like so many of us do. I've served on PTO boards. I volunteer with community organizations. Outside of my work with Kyrene, I'm involved in a lot of other organizations that do support education, including Jobs for Arizona Graduates. I'm the chair of that board, and I've been on the chair of that board for many years. It's actually one of the oldest and most successful student mentoring and dropout organizations in the state of Arizona, and it's been a great privilege to work with them. I also serve as a business law attorney at a law firm here in Phoenix, and I'm a partner there. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to run again. Kyrene is such a special community. Our schools are at the core of that community, and I think that's a fantastic place. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and get into our questions if I can find them. Oh, there they are. Two really great perspectives, 2 people who are engaged in public education in their community. So, and I realize too, Kevin, that you have been on the board, but in your next 4-year term, what programming and policies do you hope to bring to the district? And that same question will go to you, Trina. We'll continue with the 2-minute answer. And I'll give you a warning if you are getting close to time. So Kevin goes first this time. What programming and policies do you hope to bring to the district?
So there's some great programming that I think we're doing right now, but I think there's always opportunities for us to increase it and then also to put it into policy. One of the things that I'm mostly focused on right now is our social and emotional policy. So we are very focused in Kyrene on SEL, right? And we understand that a student is not going to be prepared to learn advanced algebra if they're not in the headspace because of trauma that they're going through in their own personal lives at home. We want to make sure they have the resources there. I think Kyrene does a fantastic job of doing that. Where I think there's an opportunity for us is to actually, as a board, come together and put that into policy, right? So that after this board is all long gone years from now, we know that we've put systems and policies in place in Kyrene that prioritize social emotional learning and have procedures and resources and funds allocated to that. So that's one of the things I really do want to bring and put into policy in this piece. Another thing that I think we're talking about right now is supporting some of our students in the LGBT community. Again, I know Kyrene has done a great job of that over the years. The legislature has been active in the last couple of sessions, passing bills that impact our ability to do just that. So I think there's an opportunity again for us to put those into policy and to really be purposeful about how we're supporting all of our students across the district. So those are two of the things that I'm focused on.
Great, thank you so much. And so Trina, same question goes to you.
So mine's kind of a piggyback off what Kevin was saying is one, focusing on making sure when all of our students feel welcome, safe, and affirmed within Kyrene, as well as our staff. And our district has done, this current board's done tremendous work. I know it's been a years long effort, but recently, I believe it was in an April meeting, they voted to implement a formal diversity, equity, inclusion policy about what it means to incorporate those pieces into our classrooms. What does it mean for our staff? What does that look like for our students? Overall, how, excuse me, about how that's going to look. But what I'd like to see moving forward is using that as a framework to examine other policies we have within our district as a lens saying, this is what we've decided Kyrene is. These are our values and what we want to kind of ground us in being a desirable workplace, a desirable place to learn, and making sure that all of our policies go back and reflect what we've said that we value in this new DEI policy.
Great, thank you. That was actually going to be one of my questions. So you already hit on one of the questions because I was going to ask if you support programming that includes diversity, equity, inclusion. But I'll take it to another, what I think is a very similar kind of place that has for some reason become really contentious in a lot of school districts. Do you support programming? This one will go to you first. Trina, do you support programming that includes scientifically accurate and age-appropriate comprehensive sex ed, or otherwise known as CSE, in the Kyrene School District?
Right now, Kyrene is, we follow what the state guidelines are. In my previous experiences working with children who've been, unfortunately victimized and seeing, other people in my life close to me be touched by child sexual abuse, I know that CSE is actually one of the main tools we have to empower our children to recognize inappropriate behavior and how to respond to that. And if that opportunity became available legislatively, that is something I would encourage within Kyrie.
Great. Same question to you, Kevin.
Yes, absolutely. I support medically accurate, age-appropriate CSE. I think for all the reasons that Trina touched on, our kiddos, while they're in Kyrene, they're entering puberty. I think there's really, I think they're looking for support and answers as they're going through that process. And as Trina also said, it's a great way for, I think, our students to recognize signs of sexual abuse, ways to report sexual abuse. I think there's really a fantastic opportunity for us to do that, all within, of course, the context of transparency, right? So like every single district in the state of Arizona, sex ed is an opt-in Kyrene, right? So that means that parents need to opt in affirmatively before they can have their student participate in sex ed. And then, like all of our curriculum, our sex ed curriculum resources are available for review at any time. As a board member, I've actually looked at some of that material before because I know that it's something that we get questions about sometimes. So I think it's important, and I think it's important that we're transparent with the community.
Great, thank you. I think we might finish early tonight, y'all. So that I'm gonna just go ahead and put it out there again. If you do have any questions, whether it is on Facebook or it's in the chat here, please by all means go ahead and do that. So that will take me to another question that has been popping up a lot, unfortunately, since I think it was May. It's really hard to even keep track anymore. But given the recent school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and this one will go to you first, Trina, this time. Wait, hold on. This one will go to Kevin first this time, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank goodness. So given that recent tragedy in Uvalde, what do you think needs to be done with regards to stopping school shootings? So I guess this is a two-parter. With stopping school shootings, first of all, even though it might not be something that you can necessarily control, but the second part of the question is, what role can school boards play to keep kids and staff safe from a school shooting or in the instance of a school shooting? So Kevin, you'll go first.
Yeah, I think it's an absolute failure of our nation that we are somehow putting the safety of our students onto our teachers and onto our school board members and onto our principals, when there is such, I think, a commonly accepted need for responsible gun ownership. And there could be laws that are passed by both sides of the aisle that could have gun responsibilities. You ask, what could we do? We could have things like red flag laws. We can close some of the loopholes. I mean, ultimately, we can make our schools the safest place that our students are in. And that's true. It's more safe than a mall. It's more safe than a movie theater. But at the end of the day, we cannot continue to put this burden on our teachers. I mean, our teachers are demonstrating more bravery than our legislature in that respect. So I think there are opportunities as a country and as a nation to do that. What can school boards do? Well, Kyrene's already done a lot. I mean, we have an emergency management team, we have controlled access points, we have video systems. We unfortunately have to go through emergency training with our kiddos for active shooter drills. We do all of those things. One of the things I think we can continue to do, and if we get more funding from the state, I would fully support, is really getting to some of the root causes, right? When we're talking about social emotional work, we're talking about mental health. I think making sure that we have counselors at every single one of our schools who are trained to identify warning signs and talk to some of these kiddos who are thinking about harming themselves and harming others. That's something that I think a school board can do if given the resources, is really prioritize that, because we can't always be in a Fort Knox situation. But I think we can do what we can to make sure our students and our staff are best protected.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. And the same question to you, Trina. First, what needs to be done at a more macro level? And as a school board member, what do you think you could do to help with the school shooting lockdown situation?
At a macro level, I think Kevin really addressed a lot of our lax approach to responsible gun ownership. But I also think the other side of that coin is making sure we have accessible mental health services for individuals, especially those who are younger. Finding pediatric mental health care is a really difficult thing to do. It's economically out of reach for many, many families who want help for their children. And sometimes the system is a little bit too bureaucratic for that. So I think making that more accessible also goes hand in hand with then addressing, red flag laws, boyfriend loops, things like that. And I think you have to couple those together to really start to make change. As far as what a school board can do, I absolutely agree with Kevin. Kyrene's done some amazing work, and they're doing a great job of being more transparent with the community around the ways in which they are taking school safety seriously. There's obviously our emergency management team, but there's also community committees that are involved in helping connect with our campuses, making sure students, our buildings are safe, and come and pitch in if there is a situation in the community. We're able to kind of respond. I think of like a phone tree in my mind, but I know that's not quite how it's phrased. But I think systems like that are really important, but making the community also aware of the steps that we've taken in Kyrene to make sure our students and our staff are safe. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I just got a little bit distracted. I thought that I saw a comment on Facebook, but I didn't. And yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the mental health of our young people. There was a great piece. I just finally got around to watching it last night on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. And I mean, I knew that finding a mental health care professional was difficult. But I didn't realize how much more difficult it is for parents to access it for their children. And since COVID, and I think with a lot of other things that have been going on in the world, they've seen, they had some mental health experts on there and they've seen a spike, right? But unfortunately, there are not enough mental health caregivers, and it is cost prohibitive. And then you have to deal with the insurance company. And because there's a shortage, I mean, I heard a story on his show last night that was about a teenage boy who essentially had to stay in an emergency room for 27 days before they could find somebody who could address his needs and he could go to some kind of outpatient. There was another woman who thought the insurance would approve it, an 85-day stay. It ended up costing the family $88,000. So over $1,000 a day. I mean, it was just kind of a sad statement on our priorities in this country, and especially, I mean, healthcare in general, but especially mental health care. So I really appreciate you bringing that up because a lot of our members might not know that. So we're going to start with Trina again on this next question. So let's see. What approach, Trina, do you think that schools and school districts should have with regards to student discipline? And then Kevin, you'll go after that, but what approach, Trina, should schools and districts have with regards to student discipline?
That's a really great question. I always, not always, but I tend to lean to more restorative practices. I think it's important to remember that our children, especially with Kyrene, we're a K-8 district, these are developing minds. So I think the discipline needs to match where the child is developmentally, and then also take into account what is that behavior communicating, and then hopefully connect the child and the family with the correct supports. For example, in many of our schools, I know the school that we're at, we have a wonderful school counselor that when there are incidences, if a student, needs to be disciplined, if there's a fight on the playground or something like that, yes, the parents are called, there is some discipline involved there, but then the other reaction is the students then meeting with the counselor to kind of problem solve and what different way can we approach that moving forward. I think that piggybacks on a lot of the SEL work that's happening now in our schools. Our kids have been through so much that it's really kind of walking them through these situations. We all make mistakes, some are less severe than others, but how do we deal with that going forward? Life is full of challenges, and how do we take these opportunities instead of being purely punitive and using them to help the child learn and to grow and to, again, keep moving forward.
Great. Same question goes to you, Kevin. What approach should schools and districts have with regards to student discipline?
When you ask about the approach, I think the goal has to be in mind, right? And that's to provide a safe environment for our students to learn in and a safe environment for our staff to work in. Because I think we've found over the last few years that the effects of COVID, some of our students have come back, I'd say, just really deregulated, right? We saw in the last year an uptick in some behaviors, and that shouldn't be a surprise, right? We had a lot of our kiddos who, for a long period of time, didn't have consistent social interaction, didn't develop some of those conflict resolution skills that we take for granted. A lot of times we think about fights in the hallways, but I'm talking about even things that like our first and second graders who maybe went online when they were 5 or 6 and lost out on some opportunities where we normally just kind of develop that conflict resolution behavior. So part of it's taking a step back and saying, okay, why are we having some of these behaviors and how do we address it? Discipline can be one of those things, of course, because we need to absolutely provide a safe environment. We owe that to our students. We owe that to our staff. But we found that when we put mentoring programs into our schools, when we have more access to SEL, which is now a mandatory part of our curriculum at every single school, at every single grade level, we've seen huge impact on that. In fact, when we put in a youth mentoring group at Centennial Middle School and Kyrene Middle School a few years back, we found the sort of recidivism rate of that group of students in terms of their academics, their behaviors, it improved drastically. And it's not because we gave them long-term suspension. It's because we sat down with them and we had a conversation and we really got to some of the root causes. So the other thing I think we need to be really careful about is making sure that our discipline practices are equitable, that they're fair, and that we're doing it across the board with all students, regardless of ethnicity. We know in Kyrene, just statistically, when we desegregate our data, that if you are a student of color, you are more likely to have long-term suspension and serious discipline.
Sorry about that, Kevin. I hate to cut you off, and I realize it's just the two of you, but I want to, honor everybody's time, make sure I stay under time. So thank you for that. Let's see. Let's find another question. Again, audience members, if you have any questions, by all means, or maybe everybody has a really good dinner, like cooking in the crock pot or something, maybe. And they're like, no more questions. So this is one of my, this is the question of all questions for Secular AZ, because our members are very concerned about maintaining the Establishment Clause and the separation of church and state. So this one will then go to Kevin first, 2 minutes. What role, if any, should religion play in our public schools? So Kevin, you'll go first with that one. What role, if any, should religion play in our public schools?
None. I don't think religion should have a role in our public schools in the sense that the Constitution puts out there's a clear separation of church and state. The way I look at it, we are here to serve all of our students, every single one. We want every student to feel seen and recognized and heard, and we don't want to intentionally or unintentionally make any student to feel an outsider. If parents want religious education for their children, that's great. There's opportunities for that. Religious school, after school education. My kiddos do go to religious education after school. It's not part of our public taxpayer dollars. I don't think we should be using public taxpayer dollars to be putting any single religion out in front of others. There's a great opportunity as we're going through education to learn about different cultures, to learn about different religions and to celebrate them. But I don't think there's a place for us to put one religion over the other in our public schools.
Great, thank you for that. Same question to you, Trina. What role, if any, should religion play in our public schools?
I agree with Kevin that we explicitly have separation of church and state. I don't believe we should have any publicly sponsored school that focuses on one sole religion. There are opportunities for parents to choose that if they wish for their child. As Kevin kind of mentioned in there, as students get older, they have opportunities to take electives. And so they might take a world religions class. But again, we are not advocating for a single religious viewpoint. It's more about exposure to a variety of tenets within an academic perspective. And again, that then becomes something that parents and their learners can opt into versus something that is blanket across the board for all.
Great. You know, I'm gonna ask a unscripted follow-up question, just because this was also something that came up at our last board meeting. I'm sorry, I'm not on the school board anymore. At our last candidate forum, and it's been brought up a lot to me at every level with just about everybody I run into, and perhaps it's the circles that I run with. But have you heard feedback? And I'm going to go with Trina first this time, but have you heard feedback from, you know, while you're campaigning, knocking on doors? Have you heard people in the Kyrene community talk about this massive voucher expansion that was just approved in the legislature? And if so, you know, what is that feedback generally speaking? Is it something that they approve of? Is it something that they don't want?
I do hear about the voucher expansion within the community. This past weekend, I was knocking on doors, and I was also volunteering with SOS to have people sign the petitions. And our community is concerned about that. I would say generally in Kyrene, people supported the ESA program with the intention with which it was founded, for a very specific and small group of students. The opposition comes in with the universal funding for all students that eventually, I believe the viewpoint that I've heard expressed is that it becomes a way to undermine our public schools and to kind of start pushing more students toward private or other alternative selections.
And so same question to you. What, you know, I'm sure you're knocking on doors too. You're also an elected board member. What kind of feedback have you heard about the voucher expansion? And would you say it's more on the favorable side or unfavorable side, Kevin?
You know, I've heard a lot about the voucher expansion law that was passed, and a lot of people are feeling completely disrespected by the legislature, because they come to me and they said, didn't we already have this discussion? Didn't we already vote on this? Some of them sincerely. And yes, of course, 4 years ago, we had Prop 305, and the voters voted down voucher expansion by a huge margin, 2-1. And the legislature just didn't like the message, right? The voters spoke and the legislature said, well, we don't like what you said, so we're just going to circumvent it, is what I'm hearing the most. I've even heard that from people who have used vouchers because maybe their kiddo has certain special needs that are not necessarily best met in a traditional neighborhood school. And they're really worried about the expansion because under the new proposed expansion, they don't have the priority that they currently do to get some of those special services. They're just going to be at the back of the line with everybody else. And we've seen that vouchers, as they're proposed, they don't actually work to help people come out of poverty or people who don't have choices. They typically just tend to really create more inequity, right? The people who have the ability to go use those vouchers and travel to other schools, they're the ones that use them. People who have less means usually don't. And it goes to a school that has no transparency. I can tell you in Kyrene, we have all sorts of reporting requirements on our financials, how we use our money, the auditor general, what our testing scores are, should our funding be tied to testing? That's not true at any of the private schools that are now eligible to receive millions of dollars of voucher money. So voters are talking about it, they're upset, and I think they're feeling disrespected.
Yeah, that's the general consensus for the most part in my conversation with folks too. So that's a perfect transition for our legislative session. Since we've already discussed, I can't even remember now, this legislature was such a flurry of bills, but I believe it was 2538, HB 2538, that was kind of sailed through at the midnight hour. So we've already kind of talked about that a little bit, and I feel like everybody knows what you've heard and how you feel about it. But we did see a flurry of education / school focused bills that actually became law. So aside from the voucher expansion, and I know that there's a voter initiative that people have an opportunity to sign and vote on, which bill this legislative session gave you the most concern? And how will you handle its implementation as a board member? So we will go with Kevin first this time, and I'll repeat the question. which bill gave you the most concern this legislative session, and how will you handle its implementation as a board member?
So there was a long list of terrible bills that got passed. I spoke about the voucher expansion one, but I'd like to touch on some of the bills that were proposed and that got passed that I think really go to an attack at our teachers, right? There's, I think, a culture down at the legislature of undermining our teachers as professionals, right? We as a state of Arizona consistently fail to treat our teachers and our support staff as the professionals they are. We've seen that with some of the, the gag order bills that are coming through, the bills that initially actually made teachers personally liable if they said certain things the legislature didn't like. I think that got changed to say the district is now liable, not the teacher, but the teacher is still going to be called out. We've seen teachers come under attack for that. I can tell you, as we said earlier in this conversation, curriculum transparency is the key to public school. Transparency is the key to a public school. If teachers want to come in and look at the curriculum, that our parents want to come in and look at the curriculum our teachers are teaching, by all means, we would invite you to participate in the classroom, please. But I find often the ones that are sort of attacking our public schools and our teachers are not the ones that are actually coming in and volunteering in the classroom and helping with sight words and helping with all of that. Those are some of the bills that I've been most concerned about. Implementing them as a board is always difficult when you have to implement a policy you don't agree with. I think the way that we have to respond as a public school board is to continue to empower and uplift our educational support staff and our teachers. There's lots of ways that we can do that. One of the biggest one is obviously comp and making sure that we're paying them close to what they're worth. We can't do that in Arizona, given what we've got, but it's also just empowering them and making sure that they have that. Also, the aggregate expenditure limit was terrible, and the fact that they did nothing, that wasn't actually a legislative thing they did. It was a thing they didn't do. But that's also a huge, huge failure on their part.
Okay, I think you got your last 10 seconds on that one. Good one. Trina,
I mean, Kevin can talk as much as he would like. Joy to listen to. So just repeating, can you repeat the question for me one more time? I just want to make sure I have all the
Sure. Yeah, of course. No problem at all. So the question, if I can get my mouse to work, look, my mouse just completely stopped working. The question was essentially, there were so many bills that were signed into law this legislative session that were specifically related to teaching, learning, schools, school funding, et cetera. Which one of those bills gave you the most concern? And how would you handle its implementation as a board member?
Okay, yes, perfect. So the one that actually really concerned me, just even from my own professional experience, I work at ASU in curriculum development, and I know what goes into planning a semester, right? We have, as educators, we have here are our goals, here are our learning objectives, and I create, a syllabus based on that. But if the class that I have might need to slow things down, or they're catching on to a concept really quick, I might need to accelerate things. And the thing that gave me pause is the lack of trust in our educators to be able to freely make those adjustments for either growth or maybe slowing things down to meet the needs of their students where they're at. I believe 100% in transparency, providing parents access to, here are the core tenets of what we're going to be learning this semester. These are the books that we're going to be using. Please take a look. But the ideas that I've heard floated around about daily lesson plans and things like that, that really is stifling an educator's ability to meet the needs of their students. We're bogging them down with so much administration that we might as well just be handing scripts to educators versus letting them look at the unique individuals in their classrooms and providing the differentiation that's needed. How we address that as a board member, I think currently is leaning into what transparency means and what access parents currently have. And really, I find a lot a lot of what's happening in the legislature, maybe even with education policy in general, is just very reactionary. And I always like to stop and pause at what is behind the reaction, because there's always a concern. There's always some underlying reason there, and getting to that and like, what is your fear? And what is it that you're wanting to either protect your child from, make sure your child learns, and getting to that point and addressing that thing rather than everybody turn in your lesson plans for the entire year. Because as a good educator, that's not possible.
All right. And, you know, yeah, I mean, we could probably have a good old conversation here, but this is not about me, it's about you. It is 6:40 and we do have a small forum tonight. I still am not seeing any questions in either of the chats. So I think what I'll do is just go ahead and finish out the questions that I have on my script, and we can see if any questions come up, and then we'll close it out. So we might be able to get to that delicious crockpot meal. You know, I've been watching that show, The Bear, on Hulu, where it's all about this little sandwich shop in Chicago. My next project, whenever I have time, I've never made Italian beef, like real Italian beef. So that is what I'm going to do this weekend. I'm very excited about it. And if you haven't watched The Bear, I don't work for Hulu or anything like that, but it is a really good show. And I worked in restaurants for a lot of my life, but it's also very stressful. So you've been warned. Sorry. Anyway, so let's see. Sorry, I'm hungry. I haven't had dinner and I'm really just thinking about what I'm going to eat after I'm done with this. So this one will go to Trina first. What role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies? I'll repeat the question again, and we're going to go with Trina first. What role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies?
That's a good question. I think testing has its place. I think it's a really good way to provide a snapshot and a window in time for specific learners. What I don't think it means, I think we can use it to measure growth. I think we can use it to measure quite a few things. As far as driving school programming, I think that's really, that can also be very appropriate. What I don't think is, it's kind of a misuse of standardized testing is when we get into the rating of schools that are strictly based on their test results. We know there are a lot more pieces that go into making a school, per se, a good school or an A school or B school, or what have you. And to focus mainly on here, what I know it's not AZ Merit anymore, you know, your AZ Merit scores from 2019, and kind of putting that stamp on a school loses a bit of the nuance that's involved there. But I mean, testing has its place. I mean, as a teacher, we do tests, we do formative assessments all the time. Like, where are you at? What are you learning? Because we do need students to meet certain standards. If they aren't proficient in certain reading techniques, they're not going to be able to grow in their next grade level. So I don't dismiss standardized testing or its use in providing, you know, maybe indicators for resources for schools if they need additional remediation or whatnot. But I think it's looking at it appropriately and placing it in the wider lens of the school community.
Perfect. Same question goes to you, Kevin. What role should standardized testing play in driving school programming and policies?
I agree with much of what Trina said. I think that standardized testing, like any testing, it's a tool, right? It's something that you can use to get you to your objective. And the objective is learning and growth for our students. Like, that's what we're here for. So like when we center and focus all our energy on what's best for students, getting the best score on the standardized test is not what's best for students. Learning and developing is what's best for students, and testing, including standardized testing, is one of the ways that we can give our teachers data and information to say, where are there areas that we need to go back and maybe reteach something or relearn something? Where are areas that maybe we've got this down, so let's focus on another. But that testing and that data, it shouldn't be punitive. And Trina touched on this, where now we're tying funding to test results. We all know that the results of a standardized test and how well a particular student or school is going to do is tied more than anything else to their socioeconomic background. So when we talk about using standardized testing to find where the really good schools are that should get more money, that's just creating more inequity. So the way standardized testing is used right now in this state by state law, I think leaves a lot to be desired. But I think in Kyrene, we can continue to use the testing as just one of many tools to make sure that we're helping our teachers make our students succeed.
Great, thank you so much. So there are 3 candidates running for these 2 seats. So the next question I have for you is, if you do not win a seat on the Kyrene School District Governing Board, how do you plan to remain involved in board business, decision-making, etc.? So I'll repeat that question. We'll start with Kevin. If you do not win a seat on the Kyrene School District Governing Board, how do you plan to remain involved in board business / decision-making, etc.?
So I'm here for the long haul in Kyrene, right? My kiddos are still in elementary school. And as I mentioned, I've got a 3rd one on the way. So even if I'm not on the board, I'm with Kyrene for a very long time. And it's really important to me that we continue to have really strong schools in our community. The district right now is actually at the very cusp of adopting a new long-term strategic plan. And one of the things that our district's doing a really great job about is getting community feedback and guidance. And we're doing that from parents, but we're also reaching out to different communities that traditionally aren't always heard at the table. So, we're going out to our communities on the Gila River Indian community. We're going out to Guadalupe. We're actually going out to families that live outside of our district in the Roosevelt district on baseline, but that we know come to our district, and making sure that their voices are heard. And we're also going to people who live in the district and have kids there. I would love to be a part of those conversations as we think about the mission and the vision and the future for the district for the years to come. So if I'm not on the board having those conversations, I'd still like to be part of those community groups.
Great, thank you. And the same question that I'll repeat for you, Trina. If you don't win a seat on the Kyrene School District Governing Board, how do you plan to remain involved in board business, decision-making, etc.?
Well, that's not necessarily theoretical for me. So I ran in 2020 and did not win a seat. And, that's hard, but I'm still a member of the community. I still want to be involved. I have children who still are in Kyrene. And I've spent the past 3 years, including last year, as a member of the Kyrene Superintendent Council. It's one of the groups Kevin was referencing as far as giving feedback to the district on key initiatives. I, again, helped with the M&O override campaign recently. It didn't go away, and I don't plan on going away this time if the same thing occurs. I will find a way to still be of value to this community because it matters to me and my family.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. Oh, it's actually a 2-parter. So there's actually 3 questions, it looks like, coming in from the webinar Q&A. The first one is, does Kyrene require its staff, and we'll start with Trina first, does Kyrene require its staff to participate in bias training to identify their implicit biases? Good question, Sherry.
I don't know if staff is required to do training to address their implicit biases. I do know that there's been a concerted effort to provide professional development around, creating culturally responsive classrooms and culturally responsive teaching, but I don't know how. I can't definitively speak to what professional development's been offered by the district. And then, do you want me to take the second half of the question? Or did you not read that yet?
No, I didn't read that part yet. And actually, I think it makes more sense to go to Kevin, since Kevin might have a better understanding. So we'll start with just the first part. Does Kyrie require its staff to participate in bias training to identify their implicit biases?
So when I joined on the board, we were actually right at the beginning of doing a very comprehensive equity professional development program. So we had experts from outside of the district, because we also want to make sure we're getting people who can help us, right, as leaders, see our own unconscious biases, come in and really help us identify where the best path forward was. And we brought in our principals, and we were rolling out the professional development. It was required, right, for us to have these conversations at the schools. Some districts or some iterations of the past, it's like from a menu, right? You can learn about, ACEs, you can learn about equity, you can learn about this, and it's given the schools to choose. We decided in Kyrene, it was so important that we really needed all of our staff and our teachers to be part of this professional development. I will tell you that thing called COVID came through, and we did pull a lot of our PD and other responsibilities off of our teachers. So that puts pause in terms of the specific PD during the pandemic. We are now going back with earnest to put a lot of that resources back in place. Just a few months ago, we adopted policy ACB, which is our equity, diversity, inclusion policy. Trina referenced that earlier. Part of what that policy talks about is making sure that our staff have the resources and training and professional development to make sure that they can provide culturally responsive teaching, that they make sure they're identifying their own unintentional biases, things of that nature. So that's part of the work that we're doing right now, and that we're going to continue to do in the coming school year.
Okay, good, thank you. And this time we'll start with Kevin. So the second part of Sherry's question, it's a bit meaty, but it's not a two-parter or anything. So how do you address staff that don't see the importance of teaching accurate history, providing a safe space to students of color, or allowing students to identify with the gender and pronouns of their preference? This is a really tricky, very layered question, especially considering the legislative session. So I'll repeat it again. How do you address staff that don't see the importance of teaching accurate history, providing a safe space to students of color, or allowing students to identify with the gender and pronouns of their preference?
It's a very good question, and it's one that's been at the forefront of our minds, especially given the legislative activity we've seen the last couple of sessions. In my experience, our staff are always wanting to do what's best for students. They sometimes just don't know how, or they're worried that truly, that if they do something, they could get in trouble. They've seen sort of witch hunts in other districts where teachers who take well-intentioned acts are then hung out to dry by others. And I think some of it is either out of they don't know how to help, or they don't know that they have these, self-limitations. So I'll give you an example of some of the work that we're doing. We're making sure to support our LGBT, in particular, our trans students, that our school leaders are involved in these decisions, that they know what resources are available. So we have a student gender support plan in Kyrene. It's used by school leaders and our counselors to work with the student and their parents when a student's transitioning. We have ways, for example, in our student tracking for students to have their preferred name and identified gender listed. We have Kyrene transgender guidance so that we have a standardized, if you have a question, teacher, here's what you can do. Here's what you're encouraged to do. So I think a lot of it is making sure that our staff knows that these resources are available, knows that these expectations are there, and knows that they're not going to be in trouble if, for whatever reason, they go out and they step into that space. So that's one of the things that I think really it's just making sure the professional development and resources are there. Ultimately, it's the students. We have to provide a safe environment for our students. And our teachers need to be committed to providing a safe environment for our students where all of them feel safe and feel seen and feel visible.
All right, so, and I think we started with Kevin. So the same question, how do you address staff that don't see the importance of teaching accurate history, providing a safe space to students of color, or allowing students to identify with the gender and pronouns of their preference?
I agree with a lot of what Kevin said, where we want to make sure that staff are aware of the resources that are already available with the district, providing that professional development. But I also think it goes back to the policy I referenced earlier, is making sure our staff understand and our students and the community understand what we are aiming for in Kyrene. What does it mean to be a student in Kyrene? What can you expect? Can you expect to be treated with respect in regards to your pronouns or your cultural heritage, or, you know, your sexual preference, what have you, or your socioeconomic status? And the same also goes for our staff, that, you know, we want to respect them. I mean, they don't just come to work. You know, when you're a child, you thought your teacher lived under the desk. That's not true. Our staff, they're wonderful, wonderful human beings who have full lives and show up with those full lives at work. So we want everybody to feel safe and affirmed, and creating a learning environment where you can flourish as you are. If we have people who are resistant to that, I think, and aren't responsive maybe to the resources or the professional development, because while the vast majority will be there, you have to make plans for what happens for those who don't really align with that. And I think that's where it comes back to that it's great that we have that policy to lean back on, is like, this is our expectation of staff, of students within the Kyrene community. And here are the opportunities you have to learn and grow. And if for some reason that's not a fit, that's not providing a safe place, not only for students, but maybe also for some of their other colleagues.
Right. Thank you so much for that, that answer. And we're going to start with Trina again. And this one comes from a sitting board member in the Kyrene School District. And I hope I say her name right, Wanda Kulamajit. I hope I'm close. Did I do it? Kevin's applauding me, so I think I did. And we're going to start with Trina. So Wanda's question, I'll stick with her first name. What do you think the greatest challenge is facing the Kyrene School District in the next 5 years? Great question, Wanda. Thank you.
I would say the challenge facing Kyrene in the next 5 years continues to be declining enrollment. And I would say declining enrollment isn't a reflection on the excellence of the district or the quality of the staff. It's simply a result of the demographics in our area. And how do we balance that declining enrollment and still finding enrollment within our area of residence and still attracting students to maybe fill some of those gaps, and coming up with programs or ways to help people see Kyrene as their district of choice in an open enrollment area. And I think that's going to take a lot of effort by district administration, the community, and really leaning into what does our community need. We've done a great job working with ASU to help create the Spark Innovation Academy. That was a really great opportunity. We've got our dual language academies. We have our traditional academy that's a K-8 school, but really looking for how else can Kyrene maybe fill a space or meet a need in our area that maybe isn't being met by some of our brother or sister districts.
Same question to you, Kevin. And then I'm not seeing any more questions. So that means we all get to leave early tonight and enjoy the rest of our evening with our family or with our dogs, who's also part of my family. So Kevin, to you, and then you're going to close us out too, Kevin, with your closing statement. So what do you, Kevin, think is the greatest challenge that's facing Kyrene School District in the next 5 years?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Kulamajit. It's a very good one. I agree with Trina that declining enrollment is a huge challenge, but I would say, to me, the biggest challenge that we have is the exodus of teachers and support staff from the profession. That's something that I really worry about for the future years. We already know that there are more people retiring from the profession of teaching that are coming out of teaching schools and colleges throughout the country. This is not unique to Arizona. But what's particularly exacerbated in Arizona is how we continually underfund our schools, and therefore we cannot pay our teachers and our support staff a respectable salary that they deserve. I will tell you that we do not have a teacher shortage, right? We sometimes hear that. We have a shortage of educated professionals, many with master's degrees who refuse to work for $35,000. That's what we have. And Kyrene and its team does everything they can. They do magic to find money to get into the salaries and compensation of our staff, and especially our teachers, but also I would tell you in the last 2 years, a huge focus on our educational support staff as well. So our district leadership is doing amazing work with that, but they can't create money that's not there. And I've had amazing teachers in my kids' education throughout the years, absolutely amazing. And it breaks my heart to see them leave the profession, not leave Kyrene, leave the profession, because they can make more money working at a mid-level job at Salad and Go than they can make working as a public teacher in Arizona. And that's what keeps me up at night. We're fortunate that we don't have the vacancies that some of our rural districts do. But I'll tell you, our students deserve to have the best in the classroom, and it's really hard to do that in Arizona.
Excellent. All right, seeing no more questions, making sure I don't see any more on Facebook, and I don't. So we're going to close up the question portion of this. We're going to leave a little bit early tonight, and that means this is your opportunity to tell the people why they should vote for Kevin Walsh for Kyrene, or why they should vote for Trina Nelson for Kyrene. So we're going to start with you, Kevin. Why should the people support you?
Thank you. Well, I hope that I can earn the support for one of the 2 open seats that'll be on the Kyrene School Board. I think that I have demonstrated my commitment to public education. I know how important it is to have strong public schools in Kyrene. I'm of this community. My kids go to those schools. I can tell you that my family teaches in those schools. And where I think I bring a unique value is that I have the experience and proven leadership over the last 4 years. I've served on this board for 4 years. I've served as president for 2. Those 2 years have been among the most challenging years for public education, certainly for Kyrene. Over those 4 years, I visited every single one of our 26 schools, talked to our school leaders, our counselors, our teachers, our parents. I really know and am familiar, both through personal experience and through going out to the community, where our biggest challenges are. There is a lot to celebrate in this district. There's so much that I want to continue to support. And there's a lot of opportunities for us to continue to do some really great things. So I think given my skill set, given my experience, I think just given my demonstrated passion, I really hope that I can earn one of your 2 votes to be on the Kyrene School Board for a 4-year term.
Thanks, Kevin. Trina, same question to you. Why should people vote for Trina Nelson for the Kyrene School Board?
I would hope that people would feel encouraged to vote for me for one of the 2 open seats, that because I'm a mom, I'm an educator, and I've demonstrated over the last few years that I don't view school board necessarily, not saying that anybody currently running does, but there's that stereotype that people use it as a stepping stone. And I don't view school board as a stepping stone. I view it as one of the most impactful positions of public service that one can participate in that directly affects our community. And instead of, running away, I've doubled down and continued to serve this community. I care deeply about Kyrene. I care about the children in it, and I care about the staff, and I care about our community. And I hope that I can continue to be someone who can be a resource for questions that people have within the community, that, as a board member, if I earn that vote, that I can continue to find ways to collaborate and to, be a consensus builder, so that Kyrene can keep moving in it's really a really great direction that we can build upon the successes that happened in the past and are still continuing to move forward, and to see great things happen in the future.
Great. Thank you both so much. First of all, thank you for stepping up to run. I really agree with Kevin, and I love the fact that now Trina, despite not quite making the mark for 2020, has stepped back into the ring. I think it's commendable, and I think it speaks volumes about your character and your care for your community. When people, devote that much time to making their community better, it says a lot about you. And I agree with what you said, Kevin, that for me, professionally, being on my local school board was one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire professional career. So thank you both for not only running, but for showing up tonight, and for, being somebody who really cares about all the way down the ballot races, because these are important races. For the rest of you, I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I believe next week we have Marana. We are, oh good. If you want to share your screen, Lindsay, by all means, go ahead and share it. We have the Marana Unified School District, which is a Pima County school district. We had Flagstaff about a month ago or so. We want to make sure that we're not just focused on Maricopa County. After that, the next Wednesday after that, we will have DISART candidates. But in the meantime, we've been trying to kind of keep it to Wednesday evenings and Friday afternoons as much as we can while we work with our wonderful speakers' schedules. But we have a fantastic program coming up with Jared McDonald Eboy. He is an Arizona Mirror reporter and documentary filmmaker who is going to be discussing QAnon candidates in AZ. We just had primary day yesterday. And yes, there were some QAnon candidates who made it onto the ballot in the general election. So I'm really looking forward to this, especially in context with these primary candidates. And I hope we can discuss them a little bit deeper. One of our favorite liaised groups is the Arizona End of Life Options, AZELO. They're a fantastic group, and they always have great programming about, death and dignity, and how you can find help, how you can work through it, and what that all looks like. Then on the next Friday, we also have one of my favorite Twitter handles, Twitter people, authors, Hemet Mehta is the friendly atheist on Facebook or on Twitter. And if you don't follow him, you should. He is going to talk a little bit about Christian hate preachers. And yes, that actually is a thing, very much not Christ-like. But he's going to be kind of breaking down some of the attacks that we've seen happening during these culture wars that have happened all over the United States. So that one's a great one. And then, as I said, we had scheduled the DISART school. Oh, wait, hold on. There's also, those classes aren't quite opened up yet. We do have August 19th, a great group out of Tucson called the Equality Squad, and they are focused on the rights of our LGBTQ youth. So they will be speaking with us. So, if you are not already a member and you are just watching or listening to these programs, you should really become a member. Also, our membership is going to be increasing at the end of this year. We also right now have a very generous donor who's very concerned about the current state of things happening in the United States, who has donated a generous amount of money, and we're doing a matching program. So if you are as concerned as we are about the rise of Christian nationalism here in Arizona and the rest of the United States, well, by all means, please participate in that matching program. We also have some really wonderful rainbow I Read Band book shirts. So if you want one of those, we've got them in men's and women's, white and blue and black, I think. We're kind of limited at this point, but if that's something that you want to wear when you go to meet the teacher night, I'm sure your teacher would appreciate it. So all that said, I'm going to let you all get to your families, get to your dogs, get to your Chicago beef, so your Italian style beef sandwiches, whatever it is that you're going to do tonight. Watch reruns of Friends. Great. Thank you all so much again for being here. Thanks again to Lindsay for always being the magic behind the scenes. And until Friday, if you're able to make it, we'll see you later, everybody. Have a great day. Take care.